Another year has passed us by, and as such, it is time once again for us to take a look back at the past 12 months and shine a light on the absolute worst, most awful games to grace our PCs and consoles in 2024, at least according to professional critics. Before we get into it, it's probably worth reminding you of the rules of engagement. A game can qualify for today's list if it was released at any point in 2024 and received at least 7 professional reviews according to Metacritic, who still haven't sorted out their atrocious UI, by the way, despite several strongly worded letters from our writer. It's also worth noting that whilst we're good, we're not wizards, and so I've had to write this script a few weeks before the end of the year, so if anything rubbish came out in December, we might have missed it, and we're sorry. Shall we look at some? I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are the 10 worst games of 2024. Number 10. Die by the Blade. PC. 54%. We're kicking off this year's list with a game that actually isn't horrendous, but is decidedly more meh than most. Die by the Blade, which comes to us from developers Grindstone, Triple Hill Interactive, and Toko Midori Games, is a 1v1 weapons fighter set in a samurai punk world. Players begin by choosing a fighter and a weapon, the latter of which informs how they must approach each encounter, as different weapons offer different movesets, and then do battle against opponents in a world that's 50% Ghost of Tsushima and 50% Cyberpunk 2077. It is probably worth noting, though, that the resulting whole is not greater than the sum of its parts. Several critics described Die by the Blade as feeling unfinished, citing its lack of content and polish as reasons why. There wasn't nothing there to enjoy. Many did quite like the actual gameplay and felt that with a bit more work from the developers, Die by the Blade could evolve into something really special, but as things stood upon its release, it seemed like an early access title masquerading as a finished product. No one likes a liar. Die by the Blade. Now go and sit in the corner and think about what you've done. Number 9. Funko Fusion. PS5. 53%. It kind of hurts to see a game like Funko Fusion on this list. After all, the Funko brand has access to all manner of IPs, and as such, a game based on the little large-noggined figures could have been brilliant. Alas, it wasn't meant to be. In Funko Fusion, players take control of digital versions of their favourite pop Funkos and get to explore worlds based on fan-favourite films, games, and TV shows, including the likes of Jurassic Park, Mega Man, and The Umbrella Academy. Each Funko has their own unique abilities, and there are more than 60 for players to unlock over the course of the game. Critics didn't hate the concept of Funko Fusion, and really rather enjoyed the inclusion of so many different franchises in the game, but they were less than impressed with the execution. The myriad bugs present upon launch, along with some uninspired combat, made up for the bulk of the criticism. Plus, the lack of co-op gameplay upon release was a massive miss for a game that bore more than a passing resemblance to those in the Lego franchise. Funko Fusion? More like Funk, oh god, better avoid this game at all costs. Got 'em. Number 8. Silent Hill: The Short Message. PS5. 53%. It's been a bit of a mixed bag of a year for the Silent Hill franchise. On the one hand, Bloober Team surprised pretty much everyone by giving the world a Silent Hill 2 remake that was actually really gosh darned good, but on the other, we also got Silent Hill: The Short Message, which despite being free, some would still argue was overpriced. The PlayStation 5 exclusive, which was both developed and published by Konami, follows Anita, a teenage girl who, after receiving a series of strange text messages from her deceased friend, must look for clues in an abandoned apartment complex in Germany in order to find answers. Average review scores ranged anywhere from a respectable 80 out of 100 to an abysmal 30, but most landed somewhere in the region of "it's not very good." The game did garner praise for its story and characters, but most felt they were squandered on a game with completely shallow and unoriginal gameplay. If you're a massive fan of the Silent Hill series and happen to own a PS5, then there's no harm in giving this one a go, but we wouldn't recommend anyone else go out of their way to experience it, no matter how short the message might be. Number 7. South Park Snow Day. PS5. 52%. If you'd have asked us a couple of years ago if we ever thought we'd see a South Park game on one of these lists ever again, we'd have probably told you no, on account of the fact that the Stick of Truth and the Fractured But Whole are a pair of excellent RPGs. Just as a stopped clock is right every so often though, occasionally we get things wrong, and here to prove that point is South Park Snow Day. The latest video game offering from South Park Digital Studios alongside developer Question and publisher THQ Nordic sees the boys and the new kid enjoying a day off from school after a blizzard hits. Naturally, they decide to resume their role-playing game we first encountered in the Stick of Truth, and chaos ensues. Bizarrely, Snow Day is not an RPG, but is instead an action-adventure game, which is a choice on the part of those in charge? We're not the only ones who missed the RPG hijinks of the previous games either. Critics lamented this change in direction, as well as the repetitiveness of the gameplay, the lack of content, and the fact that the series' trademark humor was almost entirely absent. We understand it's a snow day, but that doesn't mean the laughs have to stay at home too. Number 6. The First Descendant. PS5. 52%. Do you play a lot of Destiny 2 but yearn for a game that's similar but not quite as good? Then by Jove, are you gonna like this next entry? Spoiler, you're not. The First Descendant is a free-to-play third-person MMORPG looter shooter in which players must take up the mantle of one of the titular Descendants, folks with mysterious powers, in order to repel the Vulgus, an invading alien force. Throughout the game, players will complete quests in a variety of locales, earn resources to craft items and level up their Descendant, and discover mods which can be used to improve their weapons. The First Descendant's biggest crime, at least in the eyes of reviewers, was the fact that it was so bang average. Nothing it did was done exceedingly well, but nor was it done particularly badly either. It was also bogged down by some samey missions, awkward dialogue, a fairly wonky storyline, and a silly amount of grind, plus many players were less than impressed with the frankly excessive level of monetization. We understand that a free-to-play game has to make money somehow, but when most of your mechanics seem like they're designed to steer players towards microtransactions, that's not cool. Number 5. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Arcade Wrath of the Mutants. PC. 51%. You might remember that a couple of years ago, a game came out by the name of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, and if you do remember it, you'll probably also remember that it was really rather good. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Arcade Wrath of the Mutants, on the other hand, is not very good. Hooray. Wrath of the Mutants, which was released in April 2024, is essentially a port of the 2017 TMNT arcade game, just with a few added stages and boss battles for good measure. Players step into the shells of Leonardo, Michelangelo, Donatello, or Raphael and are tasked with beating the snot out of a parade of baddies, all with the goal of thwarting Shredder's maniacal plans. For once on one of these worst games lists, Wrath of the Mutants didn't get blasted for being technically wonky. It did, however, get blasted for being shallow, short for the price, which was higher than that of Shredder's Revenge, and for being nothing more than a repetitive button masher. But hey, at least it worked! And in fairness, with the industry in the state it's currently in, that's more than can be said for a lot of games at launch. Number 4. Taxi Life, a city driving simulator. PC. 51%. If you've ever driven around a busy city, you'll know that it's not particularly fun. Bus lanes, one-way systems, pedestrians with a death wish. It's enough to make anyone swear off driving for life. Perhaps that's why Taxi Life, a city driving simulator, didn't do well from a critical perspective. Taxi Life, a city driving simulator, does exactly what it says on the tin. Players take on the role of a taxi driver working in Barcelona, and it's up to them to pick up passengers, deliver them safely to their destination, and slowly grow their transportation business, all the while taking care to avoid traffic jams and dealing with changing weather conditions. The main issue with Taxi Life, a city driving simulator, was that it was so good at recreating the experience of being a taxi driver in a busy city that it just ended up being a bit dull. It looked pretty enough, don't get us wrong, but a lack of goals, poor map layout, clunky controls, and a sprinkling of bugs and glitches meant many reviewers gave it the thumbs down. That's sort of ironic considering you'd usually hail a cab with a thumbs up, but oh well. Number 3. Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection. Xbox Series. 50%. Oh, Star Wars Battlefront, how have the mighty fallen? And we thought EA's loot box scandal was the worst thing to ever happen to the series, but nope, here's a completely shoddy port just to prove us wrong. Released in March 2024, the Star Wars Battlefront Classic Collection gives fans of the first two Battlefront games, released in 2004 and 2005 respectively, the opportunity to revisit those beloved titles of yesteryear, though thanks to the fact that the collection is massively subpar, it feels less like a trip down memory lane and more like a jaunt out to the bins to try and work out what that funny smell is. We'll get the good stuff out of the way first. The single-player campaign wasn't bad, and if you stuck with only that and didn't mind putting up with the odd crash here and there, it was alright. Alas, the online multiplayer was a train wreck, with players reporting endless server issues and bugs, and what's worse is the fact that barely any changes had been made to the original games. We didn't even get a bloody party system, for crying out loud. It might be worth buying if the devs ever get around to fixing these problems, but at the time of writing it seems there's been no such progress. Toss it in the Sarlacc pit where it belongs. Number 2. Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown. PC, 50%. We've said it before, and we'll say it again, it really doesn't seem like it should be all that hard to make a competent driving game. Program some cool cars, a decent number of fun courses, and some challenging but fair opponents. Done. It's so easy. And yet, despite the recent publication of TripleJump's Guide to Not Making Crap Racing Games, Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown still exists. Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown is an open-world racer in which players can drive around a fully recreated Hong Kong island. Players have over 30 car manufacturers to choose from, can take part in clan wars, and may participate in a competitive mode which will assign them a rank from bronze all the way up to Solar King or Queen. This might all sound great, but Test Drive Unlimited Solar Crown had myriad issues on launch. The always online requirement proved to be a bone of contention for many players. The graphics looked somewhat dated, the AI was uneven and often unfair, and there was an overabundance of grind, plus it was plagued by a variety of bugs, glitches, and server issues. Suffice it to say that the only thing being tested here is players' patience. Still bloody got it, rocking in 2024. Number 1. Jujutsu Kaisen Cursed Clash. PS5, 44%. You know, it's something of a rarity on a list like this for only one game to get a score that earns a big angry red box on Metacritic, though it would have been nice if we could have kept things in the mixed or average zone for once. Had to go and ruin things, didn't you, Jujutsu Kaisen Cursed Clash? Anyway, Jujutsu Kaisen Cursed Clash is a game of the fighting variety based on the anime adaptation of the manga Jujutsu Kaisen. Players take control of Yuji Itadori, the series protagonist, as he faces off against a number of monsters in an attempt to save the world. In addition to the single-player campaign, the game also comes with a multiplayer mode where teams can choose from 16 playable characters, in the base game that is, then duke it out in 2v2 battles. A lack of gameplay modes, a somewhat small roster of characters, and shallow combat mechanics were all things critics complained about when it came to reviewing Jujutsu Kaisen Cursed Clash. Some felt that it did a decent enough job in the fan service department, but there was nothing there for anyone but the most avid Jujutsu Kaisen enthusiasts. So well done to you, Jujutsu Kaisen Cursed Clash. You're officially the worst game of 2024. I suppose at least you're not as bad as the Lord of the Rings Gollum though, so, you know, that's something. Chin up.